Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics, and today we've got a really busy day. In order to begin the Phase 4 build out, we have to build a 125 gallon double stand. Right now the 125 is sitting on a store-bought stand, but we want to put a 125 above that because, as I mentioned in the Phase 4 intro that I did, we have some fish to move around and some fish that need larger tanks. So we're going to go ahead and get that stand built. In the description below, I will put everything that you need, including a list of materials that we used. I will put links in the description below in case you are looking for wood screws or glue and the stuff that we use, the paint. So I'll try to put that in the description below as well. We'll go over the planning process, how I know how much wood to buy, and we'll show you how we build it, so stay tuned. All right, so it doesn't start out super pretty. This is just a very rough sketch of the 125 gallon stand I want to build. And what I do is I have to take into consideration the height, the length, and the width of the 125. I leave myself 1 inch extra in the length, 1 inch extra in the width, and I try to leave, ideally it would be 12 inches, but because of the issues we have with the support beam in the basement, I'm only going to get 10 inches on the bottom for clearance. And then on the top, on the far right hand side, because of where that pump is and the support beam, I'm only gonna have like 5 or 6 inches of clearance, but the rest of the tank on the upper level will have more than 12 inches of clearance. So I'm happy with that. We'll make that work. I went with the 2x6s on the bottom and for the uprights, but with the tank being so heavy on the top, I went with 2x8s on the top, and so that's why I go ahead and I measure everything out, I kind of draw everything out, and then over here I have a list of the wood that I need and the sizes that I need. Once I have that, then I go through and I kind of map out how many 2x6s and how many 2x8s I will need. I kind of organize it by size, and then I go ahead and lay them out based on an 8-foot board, and I know exactly how I want to lay out each board. That saves a lot of time. It will also save a lot of wood, so you know exactly what you're going to get from each board. And I did that for both the 2x6s and the 2x8s. So the next step is going ahead and getting everything cut up. I'm not going to show you that because I've done that before. I will put a card in the upper right hand corner and in the description about how I built the stands to give you some pointers there, but I'm not going to show the cutting. But we're going to go ahead and cut up all these boards the way we need them, and then we'll come back and I'll show you what's next. Quick tip for you: once you get the first piece cut, so this is our 87.5 inch piece that's going to go across, go ahead and use that first piece as a guide for the rest of the pieces. That way you are ensuring every one of your pieces are cut to the exact same length. So I don't remeasure every single piece. Once I've got the first one done, then I will use that as a guide and then cut the rest of them at the exact same length. A couple other quick tips. As you're cutting the wood and you come down here, make sure that your blade is just outside, just to the right of that line, because if you are on the line, this blade itself is pretty thick, and it's going to take anywhere from around a 1/16, sorry for the jiggle, anywhere from a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch, depending on the thickness of the blade. So you really do want to be just to the right hand side of that line, and that way you will be actually ensured that you're getting the pieces that you need. The other thing I strongly recommend is when you've got a lot of pieces, put the actual size of the board, write it on there somewhere, so once you've got a bunch of pieces cut, you know exactly what size you've got going. Once you've got all the boards cut, one quick thing you might want to do before you start screwing everything together is get rid of all these little splinters on the ends of the board. So I usually take a file down all the cut ends. It's just going to make your life so much easier when you're assembling and later when you're painting. So definitely get rid of all this stuff on the ends of the boards. So all the wood is cut and all the wood has been de-splintered. I sanded down the edges of everything. So this is also a great time to look for things like staples or any other imperfections in the wood that you may have missed when you were at the store. Making sure there's no cracks, making sure there's no pieces that are going to compromise the integrity of your stand. So everything is cut and ready to go. Next step is we got to get this thing assembled. All right, so right now we are in the kitchen, and I prefer a very flat surface to make the horizontal pieces for the stand. So these are the horizontal pieces for the bottom part. These are the 2x6s. We have 16.5 inch cross pieces because the tank is 18.5 inches, and I want an extra inch total width, but we have to include the 1.5 inch for each one of the horizontal pieces. So that's why the cross braces are only 16.5 inches wide. Now, one real quick thing, if you are looking for fantastic screws, let me see if I can get the glare off there a little bit. These are it, and I will put a link in the description for you. If you are building fish tank stands, these are the screws to get. And the reason for that is, one, they are corrosion resistant, and two, let me show you this, which I think is super important, and that is this. They have this star pattern, and it is light years better than a regular Phillips head screw. I would never in a million years try to use those again. I tried it one time, and you spend more time stripping the screws than anything else. But these things here are absolutely fantastic. These star head screws are really, really good. So I do like to put at least 3 screws in the 2x6s. This is the frame that is going to hold the lower 125. Because of that, I'm using 2x6s. The upper 125 is actually going to be supported by a 2x8. The reason this can be a 2x6 is I plan to put a set of smaller legs right in the center of this horizontal piece, so it's not going to be bearing, the ends won't be bearing all the weight like the upper frame will be. So one of the other things I'm doing with this stand that I don't normally do, and that is I'm going to be using a little bit of wood glue. Wood glue, when it dries, is extremely good at holding wood together, so I'm going to be using that in addition to the screws. Like I said, normally all the stands that we've built in our fish room, I've never used wood glue before, but with the weight of these tanks, with how big they are, I just feel a little bit better, gonna sleep better at night knowing that we've got a little bit of extra fastening these boards together besides just the screws. So this piece here, at least it's more or less ready to go. I think I'm going to probably go ahead and put this, at least 3 of the center braces in while we're up here, and then once that's done, I can carry this downstairs, build the other one that's a 2x8, bring those downstairs, and then start assembling the vertical pieces. So this is the 2x8. This is going to hold the top 125. And I've got the cross members in there. I used 4 screws per cross member. And again, they're 16.5 inches because 16.5 plus the 3 inches of board from the horizontal pieces gives us 19.5 inches, which is going to cover all of what we need for an 18.5 inch wide 125. So the next step is we need to get the uprights in, and then we'll put the final cross pieces in there, and we will get this thing ready to go and ready for paint. Alright, so the fish room's a mess right now, so you have to excuse that. We've got the uprights in. A couple things to keep in mind when it comes to the uprights. Again, this is a 2x8 frame because that's going to eventually be the top, and then we're doing 2x6 uprights. Everything else will be 2x6s. I would highly recommend a couple things. One, we've got 4 screws on the back side of this. We'll put another at least 2 or 3, if not more, on the front side going in there. Also, when you are leveling things, you just be really careful. The floor that you're using may not be level. The ends of the wood may not be level, nor are the squares necessarily going to be level in between your joints there, although they should be. So make sure you're using a level to ensure that your uprights are exactly square. Because if you try to use anything else, there is a chance that when you finish this thing, you're going to find out that things are not quite 100% square. So always use a level. So if you look at the list, you're going to see that I have 4 2x6 pieces that are going to be 13.5. What are those for? Well, these are going to go in between the legs. One of the things that I want to protect against is the possibility of the legs collapsing inwards on the top or the bottom. These 2x6s are spaced right between the 2 legs. To help ensure that that doesn't happen, I will place them here, and I will also either place them at the very bottom or at the part of the probably where the bottom stand is going to sit will be more appropriate in this particular build. So that's why those 4 2x6s are there at 13.5 inches, just to protect the legs, making sure that they stay in place. All right, so essentially the weight of the upper 125 is resting on these 2x6s that I'm putting in the uprights. So I've added these now. Couple things. Thing number 1, make sure these are level, because if they're not, you could have a big disaster going on. So I got to make sure that the 2x6s are resting flushly on the 2x8s. I used wood glue, of course, like I've already mentioned. I don't normally do that, but for this stand I am. And then I've got 6 screws holding it up. A clamp is nice just because it holds everything steady while you're trying to screw stuff in. That's why that's there. That's coming off right away. But 6 screws, wood glue on the back, and then the big thing here is making sure that this is a nice even fit, and eventually that this up here has to also be a nice even fit, because if it's not, that's actually where the lower cross members are going for the bottom 125. Remember, everything right now is upside down. All right, so the second side brace is built. Now, some words of wisdom here that I've learned, especially if you're dealing with 2x6s, be very careful when you screw these in. And I particularly mean these screws here. So you're going to screw some into the other 2x6 or 2x4 there, but then you're going to probably want to screw some into the actual upright that's over here. If you go crazy hardcore and screw these in super tight, sometimes the wood will crack, especially if it's a 2x6 or 2x8. So my advice to you is to be gentle at first and be very careful not to crack the wood, because once you do that, you're going to be very, very sad. But this is, again, this is one of the, now we've got the corner ends here that's really supporting the top tank, and we're going to do that on all 4 sides, and then we'll come back and we'll go ahead and put the support in for the bottom 125. So here we go. All 4 corners have the support beams that are 2x6. You can see them here and here. So the next step is we've got to get the frame for the bottom 125 slid on top of here. If I've done everything correctly and everything is square, that should not be an issue. It should fit in relatively smoothly. Hopefully that's the case. Now there's a couple of things I haven't done to the top yet, and that is I have to put the cross bracing in right over here and over here right against the legs. I am not going to do that until I flip this over, because that is where the ends of the 125s are going to rest, and it's absolutely crucial that those end pieces, those cross braces, are the exact same height, or they are completely flush with the horizontal pieces, because if they're not, the tank's not going to sit flat. So I don't want to take a chance on that. I am going to wait to flip this thing over. Those will be the last couple pieces that go in before we start painting. I'm trying to move back far enough so we can kind of see the scale of this thing. So I got the bottom brace slid into place. It went in wonderfully. That is a good sign. So what we have to do now is I am going to go ahead and screw this bottom brace in. Remember, everything's upside down. 4 screws are going on the inside, and then once we flip everything over, I will put screws on the outside for both the bottom and the top. Put at least a couple, 2 or 3 screws coming from the other direction as well. Really lock that into place. So I'm going to go ahead, get everything screwed in, and I think at that point it will be time to flip this bad boy over. So the other super important thing is to make sure that when you're doing this top part here, which is actually the bottom, that the frame is actually resting against the uprights so that the top tank is fully supported. And sometimes it's necessary to kind of really push that wood down. Luke is doing a great job of helping, just sitting up here, making sure that the frame is nice and snug against the bottom, the uprights there. Nice job, Luke. All right, so everything is fully screwed in for the bottom 125. We also put in the 13.5-inch braces here. Once again, that's just really to hold these pieces in, these legs, and I don't ever want them on the top or the bottom to collapse inwards, and I think this will go a long way in ensuring that doesn't happen with such a large tank that is going to be, 1,200 pounds a piece. We want to make sure this thing is as strong as it can possibly be. The next step is we've got to add in these little 5-inch legs right here. So we'll do that, and once we get those in, we can flip this thing over, get the plywood on, and start painting. All right, everybody, the stand is now upright. Everything is working out pretty well. What do we have left to do? We have to put in the cross bracing right next to the legs on both the top and the bottom. And again, the reason why I left that off until now is it's super important that those cross braces are very flush with the horizontal pieces, because if they're not, we got a problem, right? The tank won't sit flush. So those are going in. After that, I have 2 center braces going in the bottom here. That's the reason why I went 2x6s everywhere, but then I had to go 2x8s on the top because there is no center brace. So to give it a little bit of extra strength, we went ahead and did the 2x8s on top for that second 125. And then down here, we'll have the center braces, which should be fine. Then we have to get the plywood on, and then I think it's time for painting. All right, everybody, it's a little difficult right now to get the entire stand in one shot because it's 87.5 inches long. It's basically done. All right, so I added the plywood. I did add a center brace along the back side, so I just kind of screwed it into the back of the stand. This is an optional thing. It wasn't something that was in the original plans, but I had a little bit of 2x6 lumber left over, so I figured why not just go ahead and add one more center brace. It's just there screwed in to the two horizontal pieces, but it's an extra piece of wood, and I figured let's go ahead and use it wisely. So that's what we did. But this thing is basically ready to go. Now all we have to do is paint. I will make sure and put a complete list of all the materials used and what we used in the description below. So the stand is finally done. It is painted. It is ready to go. I'm not super worried about making the paint perfect right now, especially on the plywood since tanks are going to be covering it. But it's done. It takes me all day to build a stand like this. So a solid 8 hours from the time that I get the wood home, cutting it, assembling the stand, and the painting. 8 to 10 hours is pretty much a typical amount of time for me to build a stand, but for me it's worth it. Having a double stack 125 that's off the floor enough so that we don't have to worry about suction issues when we're cleaning the tanks or anything. So that is the stand, and it is complete. So that is the double 125 gallon stand. I'm happy with the way it turned out. The next step is going to be getting the 125 that's currently on the store-bought stand. We got to get that off of there. We got to get that tank onto the double stand, and so there'll be a video coming out pretty soon where we show you that process, and then after that we got to get that 125 gallon tank, the new one, on the upper level. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Building the stand, that's a lot of work. I'm glad it's done. The rest of the stuff, at least to me, is going to be easier when it comes to finishing the wall on this side of the fish room. So if you like this video, found it useful, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.